When a man in a gray hoodie and sweatpants walked into a car dealership in Walnut Creek, California, on a regular Tuesday morning in October 2013, not a single salesperson got up from their desk. Not one. He walked past rows of luxury cars worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. He picked up brochures. He sat inside vehicles. He ran his hand along the hood of a black Range Rover that cost nearly $100,000. He stood alone in the middle of the showroom floor for 10 minutes, then 20, then 30. The salespeople watched him from their desks, and they made a decision. They looked at his gray sweatpants. They looked at his navy hoodie. They looked at his sneakers. And they decided, without asking his name, without saying good morning, without offering him a glass of water, that this man was not worth their time. 1 hour passed, then 2. 2 full hours of silence. 2 full hours of a man being treated like he was invisible in a room full of people who were supposed to help him. And here is the part that will stop you cold. That man in the gray hoodie, he was one of the most famous basketball players on the planet. He had just come from practice. He had not changed his clothes. He had simply walked through a door the same way any person walks through a door, as a human being who deserved a good morning. His name was Stephen Curry, number 30, Golden State Warriors, and he had enough money in his bank account to buy every single car on that lot without blinking. But here is the thing, and this is the part that actually matters. The story is not really about Steph Curry. It is about a 26-year-old salesman named Marcus Webb, who had been watching the whole thing from across the room. A young man who had grown up with almost nothing in Antioch, California. A young man who had been knocked down 5 times in 8 months by the very people he worked beside. A young man who was one quiet decision away from either doing what was easy or doing what was right. He made a choice. He stood up. He walked across that floor. And what happened next? What Steph Curry did, what Marcus did, what the dealership did, and the secret that was sitting on Marcus's phone the entire time that neither of them knew about yet, is one of the most powerful stories you will ever hear about dignity, about assumptions, and about what happens when one small act of decency sets off a chain of events that changes everything. Stay with me for the whole video, because the ending will completely change the way you see the beginning. The alarm went off at 6:14 a.m. Marcus Webb did not slam it off. He did not groan or pull the blanket over his head. He lay on his back in the dark and stared at the ceiling for exactly 30 seconds. That was his rule. 30 seconds to breathe, 30 seconds to remember why he was getting up, then feet on the floor. No excuses. His bedroom was small, a twin bed pushed against the wall, a wooden dresser with one broken drawer that he had fixed with duct tape and never gotten around to replacing, a mirror on the back of the closet door. The apartment was on the 2nd floor of a beige building on Civic Drive in Walnut Creek, California. It was the kind of building that was always slightly too warm in summer and slightly too cold in fall. The carpet in the hallway had a stain shaped like the state of Florida that had been there since before Marcus moved in. He was 26 years old. He had been selling cars at Bay Premium Motors for 8 months. 8 months of 6-day weeks. 8 months of shining his shoes the night before and checking his tie in the mirror 3 times before leaving. 8 months of learning the difference between a customer who was ready to buy and a customer who just liked sitting in expensive cars. 8 months of watching the other salespeople and taking notes in a small black notebook he kept in his jacket pocket. He stood up. He did not check his phone first. That was another rule. Phone after coffee. Always. In the bathroom mirror, Marcus looked at himself the way a coach looks at a player before a big game. Looking for doubt, looking for weakness, checking if anything had slipped overnight. His face looked back at him, steady and serious. He had his grandmother Dorothy's eyes, deep brown, the kind that seemed to be thinking even when the rest of the face was still. Dorothy Webb had raised him in Antioch, California, 26 miles east of Walnut Creek. in a yellow house on L Street, with a porch that creaked in two specific spots, and a garden she tended like it was sacred. She had worked as a school cafeteria manager for 22 years. She had never made much money. She had never once made Marcus feel like that mattered. You walk into every room like you belong there, she used to tell him, smoothing his collar before school. Because you do. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. Marcus thought about Dorothy while he made his coffee. He thought about her while he ironed his white shirt, the good one, the one with the small buttons at the cuffs that he had bought at the Macy's in the Sun Valley Shopping Center the week before he started the job. He knotted his navy tie twice before it hung right. He checked the mirror. He picked a piece of lint off his left shoulder. He was ready by 7:30. The drive to Bay Premium Motors took 11 minutes on a quiet morning. Marcus drove a 2009 Honda Civic with 94,000 miles on it and a crack in the passenger side mirror that had been there since a parking lot in Antioch. He kept it clean. He vacuumed it on Sundays. The dealership sat on the corner of Ignacio Valley Road and North Main Street, wide and bright in the pale October morning light. 37 vehicles lined the lot in rows, sedans, SUVs, luxury models, whose paint jobs caught the early sun like mirrors. A yellow banner above the entrance read, "Fall into Savings Event. All models available." Marcus parked in the employee lot behind the building. He sat in his car for exactly 30 seconds, same as every morning. Then he picked up his notebook, put it in his jacket pocket, and got out. The air smelled like cut grass and the beginning of something. He didn't know what yet, but he would. He just didn't know it yet. Inside the break room, Marcus poured his coffee, black, no sugar, the way Dorothy had always made it, and stood at the counter reviewing the morning inventory sheet. 37 vehicles. He knew every single one, not just the make and model and price. He knew the features, the seat configurations, the engine specs, the little details that made one car different from another car that looked almost identical on the outside. He had spent his first 2 months at Bay Premium Motors reading every brochure in the rack, front to back, twice. Nobody had asked him to do that. He had done it because he believed in being ready before the moment arrived. Dennis Farrell arrived at 8:02 a.m., already on his phone, already laughing. Dennis was 39 years old and had been the top salesman at Bay Premium Motors for 4 straight years. His photo hung on the wall near the customer service desk in a silver frame. A wide smile, a firm jaw, silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, in a way that made him look trustworthy without trying. He wore cufflinks on Tuesdays. He drove a black Audi he had bought off the lot with his employee discount, and mentioned it often. He gave Marcus a nod as he passed the break room doorway, the kind of nod that meant you exist and nothing more. "Big day today," Dennis said to the room in general, ending his call and sliding his phone into his breast pocket. "I feel it in my bones." Marcus said nothing. He folded the inventory sheet and put it in his notebook. The lot opened at 9. By 10:30, it had been a slow morning. A young couple had come in, walked around a compact SUV for 20 minutes, and left to think about it. An older woman had asked Dennis 3 questions about a silver sedan, and then driven away without leaving her name. Marcus had spoken with a man named Carl, who said he was just looking, and took a brochure about the BMW X5. Kevin Ortiz, one of the other salespeople, was eating a granola bar at his desk and scrolling through his phone. Sandra Park was reorganizing the brochure rack near the window for the second time that morning. It was the kind of slow that made the clock feel broken. Then the front door opened. The man who walked in was wearing gray sweatpants, a navy blue hoodie pulled up to the chest, and a pair of white Nike Hyperdunk sneakers. He was lean and medium height, with long fingers and the unhurried way of moving that belonged to someone completely comfortable inside their own body. He didn't rush. He didn't look around the room the way nervous people do, checking to see who was watching. He walked in, put his hands in his front pocket, and started looking at the cars near the entrance with quiet, focused attention. Not the glazed look of someone killing time. The steady look of someone actually deciding something. Marcus straightened at his station near the door. Across the showroom, Dennis Farrell glanced up from the sports page spread open on his desk. He looked at the man in the gray hoodie. He looked for 3 seconds. Then he looked back down at his paper. He did not stand up. He did not walk over. He picked up his coffee mug and turned the page. Marcus took 1 step forward. "I'll take it," Dennis said. He didn't look up. He held out one hand in Marcus's direction, palm flat, the way you'd stop a car pulling out of a driveway. His voice was completely relaxed, the voice of someone managing a minor inconvenience. Marcus stopped. "You sure?" he said. "I said I'll take it, Webb." This was a game Dennis had been playing since Marcus's first week, calling customers before he had any intention of helping them, holding them in reserve the way you'd save a seat at a table you weren't sitting at yet. Marcus had been keeping count. This was the 5th time, so Marcus went back to his station, and he watched. The man in the hoodie moved through the showroom without hurry. He stopped at a white BMW 5 Series near the front. He ran one hand slowly along the hood. Not a showy gesture, just a real one, the way you'd touch something you were genuinely considering. He looked at the price sticker. He moved on. He stopped at a dark blue Mercedes-Benz E-Class. He opened the driver's door and sat inside. He adjusted the seat slightly. He rested both hands on the steering wheel. He sat there for nearly a full minute, looking through the windshield at nothing in particular. Then he got out and moved to the center of the showroom floor, where a black Range Rover Sport sat on a raised display platform under a cone of soft LED light. He looked at the Range Rover for a long time. He had still not been greeted. Not one word. Not one good morning. Not one "can I get you some water?" or "feel free to let us know if you have questions." Dennis had not moved. Kevin had finished his granola bar and was back on his phone. Sandra had straightened the last brochure and gone to refill her coffee. The man in the hoodie stood alone in the middle of the showroom and looked at a $96,000 vehicle with the same calm expression he had worn since he walked through the door. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then 45. Marcus watched the whole thing. He watched the man pick up the Range Rover brochure from the display stand, open it, read it, actually read it, not skim it, fold it carefully, and put it in his hoodie pocket. He watched him walk back outside through the glass doors into the October sun, circle 2 vehicles in the front row, and come back inside. He watched him stop at the brochure rack near the window and study the layout of options available. And Marcus noticed things. The Nike Hyperdunks were a specific model, a basketball shoe, a serious one, not a lifestyle sneaker people bought at the mall. The Under Armour logo on the chest of the hoodie was very small and dark, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. The man's hands were long and large-knuckled, the hands of someone who used them, a musician maybe, a craftsman, an athlete. Marcus turned these pieces over quietly in his mind, without arriving anywhere specific. At the 1-hour mark, Dennis looked up from his desk again. The man in the hoodie was at the far end of the showroom, reading a brochure for the Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Dennis leaned slightly toward Kevin Ortiz's desk and said, just loud enough for Kevin to hear, "Hour of free air conditioning." Kevin smiled without looking up. The words landed in Marcus's chest, like something dropped on a hardwood floor. A small sound, a permanent mark. He stood up from his station. He felt his heart doing something quiet and certain. "Dennis," he said. His voice was steady. "I'll take him." Dennis looked over. His expression moved through amusement and arrived at something that felt like pity. "Knock yourself out, kid," he said, leaning back in his chair. "He's wasted enough of my time." Marcus straightened his tie. He walked across the showroom floor toward the man in the gray hoodie. Steady steps, no performance, no practiced smile, and stopped 2 feet away. The man looked up from the brochure. His eyes were warm and completely calm. There was something in them that Marcus would think about later, a kind of private amusement, like a man who had been waiting at a door for a long time and had finally heard a knock. "Good morning," Marcus said. "I'm sorry it took us this long to say that. My name is Marcus. Can I help you today?" The man looked at him for one moment. Then he smiled. "Yeah," he said. "I've been looking at a few things." Marcus pulled out his notebook. Not his phone. Not a tablet. His actual notebook. The small black one with the worn corners that he carried in his jacket pocket every single day. He clicked his pen and looked up. "What's catching your attention most?" he asked. The man nodded toward the center platform. "The Range Rover. But I want to sit in the S-Class before I decide anything. And the X5. I want to compare the two." "How many are you thinking about today?" Marcus asked. "Just so I pull the right keys." The man tilted his head slightly. A small smile moved across his face, like he was deciding how much to say. "Let's start with a few," he said. "See how I feel." Marcus wrote that down. A few. See how I feel. In his 8 months at Bay Premium Motors, Marcus had learned that those words, "see how I feel," meant one of two things. Either the customer was browsing and would leave with nothing, or the customer already knew exactly what they wanted and was simply giving themselves permission to want it out loud. Something in the way this man stood, relaxed, unhurried, with the posture of someone who had made large decisions before and was not afraid of this one, told Marcus it was the second thing. "I'll get the keys," Marcus said. "You want water while you wait? Coffee?" "Water would be great," the man said. Marcus went to the break room. He filled a glass from the filtered tap, grabbed the keys for the Range Rover Sport, the S-Class, and the X5 from the cabinet on the wall, and was back on the floor in under 2 minutes. He found the man standing beside the Range Rover again, one hand resting lightly on the driver's side door. He was looking at the interior through the window, the stitched leather seats, the wood trim on the dashboard, the screens stacked cleanly in the center console. "Here you go," Marcus said, handing him the water. The man took it. "Thank you." 2 words. Simple. But he said them the way people say things when they mean them, looking directly at Marcus, not past him, not through him. They spent the next 15 minutes going through the Range Rover together. Marcus didn't perform. He didn't use the voice salespeople sometimes use, the slightly louder, slightly smoother voice that is less about the car and more about the salesperson. He just talked about the vehicle the way he would talk about anything he actually knew. The terrain response system, the air suspension that adjusted automatically to the road, the way the rear seats folded in 3 separate configurations depending on what you were carrying. The man asked good questions, specific questions, not the questions of someone trying to seem knowledgeable, but the questions of someone who had already done research and was now checking the research against reality. Then Sandra Park made a sound. It came from across the showroom. A sharp, sudden intake of breath, the kind that turns heads. Marcus looked over. Sandra was standing beside the brochure rack with her phone in both hands, staring at the screen. Her face had gone completely still. The kind of still that happens when your brain receives information it needs a moment to process. She looked up. She looked at the man standing beside Marcus. She looked back at her phone. Her lips formed a single word, silently, like she was saying it to herself first, to make sure it was true before she said it to anyone else. Marcus followed her eyes. He looked at the man beside him. Really looked. The way you look when you stop just seeing someone and start actually taking them in. The lean build, the long fingers wrapped around the water glass, the easy posture, the Under Armour logo so small it was almost a secret. And then it clicked. The way things click when they were always there and you simply weren't looking in the right direction. Marcus had watched Stephen Curry play basketball in October 2012 at Oracle Arena in Oakland, sitting in the upper deck with 2 friends, eating a $9 hot dog and watching number 30, drained 6 three-pointers in the third quarter alone. He remembered thinking that Curry moved on the court the way water moves, finding every opening, never forcing anything, always exactly where he needed to be. The man standing beside him in the gray hoodie moved the same way. Marcus kept his face completely still. He did not gasp. He did not freeze. He did not reach for his phone or look around the room to see who else had caught up yet. He felt his heart rate climb exactly once, like a single step up a staircase, and then he breathed it back down. Because here is what Marcus understood in that moment, with the certainty of someone who had been raised by a woman who believed that how you treat people is the truest thing about you. It did not matter who this man was. It had never mattered. What mattered was that he had walked through a door and spent 2 hours being invisible, and the first human being in this building who had treated him like he was worth a good morning was Marcus Webb. And Marcus was going to finish what he started. "Ready to see the S-Class?" he said. Stephen Curry looked at him. Something passed across his face. Recognition, maybe. Not of Marcus specifically. Of the moment. Of what Marcus had just chosen not to do. "Yeah," Curry said. "Let's do it." They walked together toward the back of the showroom. Behind them, at his desk, Dennis Farrell had finally looked up from his sports page. He was holding his phone. His face was the color of old chalk. He had just run a search for the Under Armour basketball roster. The result was loading. Dennis Farrell stared at his phone screen. The little circle spun. The page took 3 full seconds to appear. 3 seconds that felt, later, like the 3 seconds before a car accident when you see everything clearly and can do absolutely nothing about it. The page loaded. Stephen Curry, Golden State Warriors, number 30. 2-time NBA All-Star. Davidson College. Born March 14, 1988. Current season stats. Dennis stopped reading. He looked across the showroom. He looked at the man in the gray hoodie walking alongside Marcus Webb toward the Mercedes-Benz S-Class at the back of the floor. Dennis set his phone face down on his desk. He picked it up again. He set it down again. Kevin Ortiz had rolled his chair 2 feet to the left to look at Dennis's face, and had immediately understood that something had gone badly wrong. "You okay?" Kevin asked. Dennis did not answer. He was doing the math. The fast, ugly, back-of-the-envelope math that every salesperson does without meaning to. Commission rates, vehicle prices, number of units, total value. He was adding it up before he even knew how many cars were being discussed, running the numbers on worst-case scenarios, and every single scenario was worse than the one before it. He straightened his jacket. He adjusted his cufflinks, the silver ones he wore on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He stood up, and he walked. Marcus saw him coming from 30 feet away. He recognized the walk immediately, the long stride that was trying to look casual and failing, the chest slightly forward, the smile already assembled and ready to deploy. Marcus had seen this walk 5 times in 8 months. He knew exactly what it meant and exactly where it was going. He made one small decision. He took one quiet step to his left, barely noticeable, natural as shifting weight, so that he was standing directly between Dennis and Stephen Curry, not blocking him dramatically, not making a scene, just present, just there. Dennis arrived. The smile went to full power. "Hey, good morning," he said, directing every watt of it at Curry like a man who had been personally delighted to see him for hours. "I am so sorry. I was tied up with something in the back. I'm Dennis Farrell, senior sales associate here, been with the store 4 years. You are absolutely in great hands with Marcus. I just wanted to personally come over and introduce myself and make sure you had everything you needed. He's been helping me." 5 words. Curry said them the way he said most things. Quietly, without heat, without drama. He wasn't being rude. He wasn't performing anger. He was simply stating a fact, with the calm authority of a man who had been standing in this building for 2 hours without a single person acknowledging him, and who had finally found the one person who had. The 5 words landed on Dennis like a door closing. His smile held. Professionals always hold the smile 2 seconds past the point where it stops meaning anything. Of course, Dennis said, recalibrating smoothly, his voice dropping into its most reasonable register. Absolutely. Marcus is one of our best people. I just wanted to make sure personally that— We're good, Curry said. He had already turned back to the S-Class. Dennis stood in the middle of the showroom floor for 1 full second. A second that felt, to everyone watching, like considerably longer. And then he turned and walked back to his desk. His cufflinks caught the overhead light as he turned. His back was straight. His face showed nothing. But Kevin Ortiz, who had watched the whole thing from his desk, would later say that it was the quietest he had ever seen Dennis Farrell in 4 years of working beside him. Not just that afternoon. Ever. Marcus let out one slow, controlled breath. He turned back to the S-Class. Sorry about that, he said. Don't be, Curry said. He was looking at the car. Not your fault. They stood together in front of the dark blue Mercedes-Benz S-Class 550, a vehicle that started at $94,000 and climbed quickly from there depending on how you built it. Marcus walked Curry through it, the way he walked through everything, from the outside in, starting with what you could see and moving toward what you couldn't. The LED headlights that adjusted to the curve of the road automatically. The Burmester surround sound system, with 24 speakers built into the cabin walls. The rear seat that reclined to an almost flat position with a footrest that extended from the front seat back. Curry opened the rear door and looked at the footrest. That's actually incredible, he said, with the genuine appreciation of someone who spent a lot of time sitting in the backs of cars traveling between cities. It's popular, Marcus said. I bet. Curry straightened up. He looked at Marcus. What about for family? For every day? Not something flashy, just something solid and comfortable. How many people? 2 adults mostly, sometimes more. Marcus walked him 6 feet to the left without hesitation. The BMW X5 sat in pearl white, clean and wide-shouldered. He opened the passenger door and pointed to the interior without a word, letting the car make its own first impression. Curry leaned in. He looked at the space. He sat in the front passenger seat. He turned around and looked at the rear cabin. This is for my mom, he said. Not to Marcus specifically. More to himself. Like a decision being made out loud for the first time. Marcus wrote it down. He did not react to the word mom the way some people would. With a softening voice, with a lean into sentimentality. He just wrote it down. Because it was important information. Because the car that was right for Stephen Curry was not necessarily the car that was right for Stephen Curry's mother. Because his job was to listen to what people actually said, not to what he assumed they meant. Does she have preferences? Marcus asked. Color, interior, tech features? Curry thought about it. She likes things simple. Not too many buttons. Comfortable. Safe. I've got 2 options that fit that exactly, Marcus said. He pulled his tablet from the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled up the spec comparison he had built 3 weeks earlier between the X5 and the Mercedes-Benz GLE, 2 vehicles in the same class that he had been comparing for a customer who never came back. He handed the tablet to Curry. Curry looked at it for a moment. He looked at Marcus. You just had this ready? He said. I keep comparisons built for vehicles in the same class, Marcus said. Makes it easier when people are deciding. Curry looked at the tablet again. Then he handed it back. I want the X5 for her, he said. And I want to see the GLE for myself. Marcus nodded. He was writing. He had now written down 4 vehicles. He had not yet said the number out loud. He was waiting for Curry to say it first. And then the door to the manager's office opened. Tom Greeley stepped out. He was 52 years old, average height, with reading glasses on a silver chain around his neck, and the unhurried manner of a man who had been doing the same job for a long time and had stopped needing to prove it. He had managed car dealerships in the Bay Area for 20 years, 2 in San Jose, 1 in Pleasanton, and the last 7 at Bay Premium Motors in Walnut Creek. He wore plain gray slacks and a blue button-down shirt with no tie. He carried a white coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Manager" on the side, a gift from his daughter that he used every single day without irony. He stepped out of his office to refill his coffee. That was all. A routine moment in a routine morning. He looked across the showroom the way he always did. A slow sweep, left to right, taking inventory of the room, the same way Marcus took inventory of the lot. It was an old habit. 20 years of managing meant 20 years of reading rooms. Before rooms knew they were being read. His eyes moved across Dennis at his desk, Kevin at his, Sandra near the window, Marcus at the back of the floor, with a customer beside the X5. Tom's eyes stopped. He was a Golden State Warriors season ticket holder. Section 112, row 14, seats 7 and 8. He had held those seats since 1996. He had watched the Warriors through the bad years, the years when Oracle Arena was half empty and the team lost more than it won, and he had stayed. He had watched a young point guard from Davidson College named Stephen Curry walk onto that court in 2009 and do things with a basketball that made the whole arena go quiet before it went loud. Tom Greeley knew that face from 30 feet away at an NBA game. He knew it from 15 feet away in his own showroom. He set his coffee mug down on the counter behind him. He did not rush. He did not make a face or gesture that would draw attention. He walked across the showroom floor at his normal pace, steady, quiet, and sat down in the empty chair beside Marcus's desk. Not in front of it, not at the head of it, beside it. The chair that customers' family members sometimes used while the main buyer did the paperwork. He extended his hand across to Curry. "Tom Greeley," he said, "I run the store." He paused for exactly 1 beat. "I want to apologize for this morning. What you experienced when you walked in, that is not how we treat people here. It should not have happened. I'm sorry it did." The words were plain and direct. No corporate language. No careful hedging. No "we strive to ensure," or "our policy is designed to." Just a man looking at another man and saying that was wrong and I'm sorry. Curry looked at him for a moment. "I appreciate that," he said. Tom nodded once. He looked at Marcus. "Marcus, you've got whatever you need. Any vehicle on the lot. Full support." Then he stood up, picked up his coffee mug from the counter, and walked back to his office. The door closed quietly behind him. Marcus sat with that for exactly 1 second. Then he turned back to his notepad. "Okay," he said. 4 vehicles. Let's go through them in order." He listed them. Range Rover Sport, black. Mercedes-Benz S-Class 550, dark blue. BMW X5, pearl white, for his mother. Mercedes-Benz GLE, to be decided on color. Curry listened. He nodded at each one. "Yeah," he said, when Marcus finished. "That's right." Marcus started on the paperwork for the first vehicle. This was the part of the job that most salespeople treated as a formality, the necessary tedium between the exciting part and the commission. Marcus did not treat it that way. He treated it the same as every other part, carefully, completely. He asked every required question and some that weren't required, because he had learned that the paperwork conversation, done right, often revealed something the customer had not mentioned yet, a preference, a concern, a detail that changed the recommendation slightly. He asked Curry about registration preferences, about delivery timing, about whether the vehicles would be primarily city driving or highway. He did not look up from his notepad when he asked the next question. It was routine. He asked it of every buyer. "And is there a primary address for delivery, or multiple?" Curry gave him an address in the Alamo area, a quiet, wealthy community in the hills between Walnut Creek and Danville, about 12 minutes from the dealership. Marcus wrote it down. Then his pen stopped. Not because of the address, because of his phone. Marcus had left his phone face up on the desk when he had gone to get the keys nearly an hour ago. He hadn't touched it since. He hadn't needed it. But now, in the small silence that followed Curry giving his address, Marcus glanced at it automatically. The same unconscious reflex everyone has, the quick check that means nothing. He saw the notification on the screen. It had come in at 9:47 a.m., 2 hours and 31 minutes ago. He had not seen it until this moment. The sender was the Bay Area Small Business Accelerator. The subject line read, "Application Decision, Marcus Webb." Marcus looked at it for one full second. Then he looked up at the paperwork in front of him. He kept writing, but his hand was not entirely steady, and Curry, who missed very little, who had spent his entire career learning to read situations faster than other people, noticed the stillness that moved through Marcus, the way a current moves through water, visible only if you were paying close attention. Curry looked at the phone on the desk. He read the subject line. He said nothing. He waited. And here is the thing about that moment. The thing that made it different from every other transaction that had happened on that showroom floor, on every other ordinary morning. Marcus Webb had spent 8 months walking into this building, believing that how you do the small things is how you do everything. He had ironed his shirt. He had learned every brochure. He had kept his notebook. He had waited his turn and swallowed his frustration and stood back up every time Dennis Farrell knocked him sideways. He had applied for something, a program, a chance, a door that might open onto the thing he actually wanted to build, and he had submitted that application in July and heard nothing for 3 months, and had almost let himself stop believing it was coming. And on the same morning that he had walked across a showroom floor and offered a good morning to a man that everyone else had decided wasn't worth their time, on that same October morning, at 9:47 a.m., while Marcus was getting car keys from a cabinet and filling a glass of water, the answer had arrived. He just hadn't read it yet, because he had been busy doing his job. Curry looked at the phone on the desk for one more moment. Then he looked at Marcus. "Hey," he said quietly, "before we finish the paperwork." He paused. "You got an email this morning." Marcus's pen stopped. He looked up. Curry nodded toward the phone. Just slightly, the smallest gesture. Marcus looked at the phone. He looked back at Curry. "I'll read it after," he said. Curry shook his head, slowly, gently. The way someone shakes their head when they want you to understand that after is the wrong answer. "Read it now," he said. Marcus looked at Curry for one moment longer. Then he picked up the phone. His thumb hovered over the notification. He was aware of everything in that second. The hum of the air conditioning above him, the soft LED lights on the showroom ceiling, the smell of new leather coming from the Range Rover 10 feet away, the sound of Dennis Farrell's chair shifting across the floor somewhere behind him. He pressed the notification. The email opened. He read the first line. He stopped breathing for exactly 3 seconds. Then he read it again. The whole thing, slowly. The way you read something when your brain keeps sliding off the words, because it cannot quite believe they are real. His eyes moved from the top of the screen to the bottom. He read the sign-off. He read the name of the person who had signed it. He read the date, and the program's start time, and the address of the first session. He set the phone face down on the desk. He pressed both palms flat against the desk surface. He took one breath, the long, slow kind that starts deep in the chest and comes out even slower, and he looked up at the ceiling for just a moment. Not dramatically, not with tears or a gasp or any of the big performances that moments like this sometimes produce in movies. Just a man, alone with something enormous, giving himself 3 seconds to feel it before he came back down. He had been accepted. Full scholarship. Bay Area Small Business Accelerator. 12-week program. Starting January 6, 2014. He looked back at Curry. Curry was watching him with an expression that was quiet and warm and completely without surprise. The expression of someone who had suspected the answer before the envelope was opened. "Good news?" Curry asked. Marcus's voice came out slightly rough at the edges. "Yeah," he said. "Really good news." Curry nodded. He didn't ask what it was. He simply nodded. The way people nod when they understand that some things belong to the person experiencing them first, before they belong to anyone else. Then he said, "What do you want to build?" Marcus looked at him. "What?" "The program," Curry said simply. "What are you going to build?" And Marcus told him, "Not the polished version. Not the version from the application essay with its careful structure and its considered language. The real version, the one that lived underneath the essay, the one that had started forming in his grandmother Dorothy's kitchen in Antioch when he was 19 years old, and watching her count out exact change for groceries, and thinking that the world was arranged in a way that made dignity harder to come by than it should be. He told Curry about wanting to open a dealership. Not just any dealership, a specific kind of place. A place where nobody who walked through the front door would be measured by what they were wearing, or what they drove, or what part of town they came from. A place where a person in gym clothes got the same morning as a person in a suit. Where the kid from the east side of Antioch with the duct-taped dresser drawer got looked in the eye and treated like he mattered. He said all of it in about 90 seconds, quietly and directly, the way he did most things. Curry listened without moving. When Marcus finished, the showroom was very still. "That's a real thing," Curry said. He wasn't performing encouragement. He wasn't giving the polished response of someone who says, "That's amazing" to everything. He was simply recognizing something true when he heard it. That's a real thing that needs to exist. Marcus looked at his notepad. "Thank you," he said. Then he picked up his pen. "Okay," he said. 4 vehicles. Let's finish this." They completed the paperwork in 40 minutes. Marcus moved through every form with the same care he had brought to every other part of the morning. Thorough, unhurried, precise. He caught one clerical error on the 3rd vehicle's registration form and corrected it before it became a problem. He confirmed delivery windows for each car. He arranged for the X5 to be delivered to a separate address, Dorothy Curry's home, though Marcus did not yet know that was her name, with a full tank of gas and a card in the glove compartment. That last part, the card, was not required. It was not a policy. It was simply something Marcus did for every delivery, because Dorothy Webb had taught him that the small gesture after the big thing was often the thing people remembered longest. The total across 4 vehicles came to just under $400,000. Marcus Webb's commission, at the standard rate, was more money than he had made in the previous 8 months combined. He did not whoop. He did not spin around to look at Dennis. He walked Curry to the front door, shook his hand, thanked him for his time, and said the cars would be ready within 48 hours. Curry stopped at the door. He turned around. "Marcus," he said. "Yeah, open that place." He said it simply, directly, without drama. The way you say something you mean completely. Open it in Antioch. Then he walked out into the October sun, got into a car that was waiting for him in the lot, and drove away. Marcus stood at the glass door and watched the car until it turned out of sight onto North Main Street. Behind him, the showroom was completely silent. Every person on the floor, Dennis Farrell, Kevin Ortiz, Sandra Park, had heard every word. Not one of them said anything. Marcus turned around. He walked back to his desk. He sat down. He picked up his notebook and wrote 2 things on a fresh page, one underneath the other. The first was a date, January 6, 2014. The second was a name, not a business name, not yet, just a word that had been sitting at the back of his mind for 3 years, waiting for the right morning to become real. He circled it once, then he closed the notebook and put it back in his jacket pocket, right where it belonged. 2 days later, the story broke. Not because Marcus told anyone, not because Tom Greeley issued a statement, not because Sandra Park posted the photograph she had taken on her phone, the one of 2 men standing beside a Range Rover, one in a gray hoodie and one in a navy tie, though she had taken it, quietly, without either of them noticing. It broke because Stephen Curry told it himself. On October 5, 2013, the Golden State Warriors played their preseason opener at Oracle Arena in Oakland. Curry scored 19 points in 26 minutes, and then sat courtside, answering questions from a cluster of reporters in the low buzz that follows preseason games, when nobody is quite paying full attention yet. A reporter from the Bay Area news group asked, almost as an afterthought, what Curry had been up to during the break between training camp sessions. Curry smiled. He said he had gone car shopping. He told the whole story. The hoodie, the 2 hours of silence, the moment a young salesman finally walked across the floor, the 4 cars. He did not name Marcus in that first interview. He said this young guy, this salesman. But what he said next was the sentence that traveled. The sentence that ran on ESPN by morning, that appeared on sports blogs and local news sites, and eventually on the kind of social media threads that people share not because they love basketball, but because they recognize something true when they see it. He said, I just kept thinking, how many times does that happen to somebody who can't afford to buy 4 cars? I was lucky I could afford to do something about it. Most people can't. That's the part that got me. The clip spread everywhere. Within 48 hours, someone had identified Bay Premium Motors in Walnut Creek. A journalist called the dealership. Tom Greeley confirmed the story without embellishment. Yes, it happened. Yes, it was one of our salespeople. Yes, we are proud of how he handled it. Marcus Webb received 17 voicemails in the first week from people who had seen the story and wanted to buy a car from him specifically. Tom Greeley gave him a raise, a permanent position in the luxury vehicle section, and the silver-framed spot on the wall near the customer service desk that had always belonged to Dennis Farrell. Dennis Farrell's photo came down on a Thursday. Marcus never asked for that. He would not have asked for that. But it happened, and when it did, Marcus simply nodded and went back to work. Because that was what he did. He completed the Bay Area Small Business Accelerator program in the spring of 2014. His business plan placed second in the cohort showcase. Through the program's alumni network, he was connected with a small investment group that had been looking for exactly the kind of venture Marcus had described. Community-rooted, dignity-driven, built for a neighborhood that large businesses routinely overlooked. It took 2 more years of saving, planning, and weekends spent driving around Antioch, looking at empty commercial properties on streets he had known since childhood. But on a bright Saturday morning in December 2015, Marcus Webb signed a lease on a property on A Street in Antioch, California, 4 miles from his grandmother Dorothy's yellow house on L Street, the one with the creaking porch and the sacred garden. He called Dorothy that evening. She cried. The good kind. He told her he was naming it Web Motorworks. She said, That's a good name, baby. That's a strong name. He agreed. And then he told her there was something else. Something he hadn't told anyone yet. Something he had been holding quietly since October 3, 2013. Since a morning that had started like every other morning and ended like no morning he had ever lived. He told her about the photograph. Sandra Park had sent it to him 3 days after the story broke. 2 men beside a Range Rover, gray hoodie and navy tie, neither of them looking at the camera, both of them looking at the car like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sandra had written in her message, I took this without thinking. I didn't know if you'd want it. I think you should have it. Marcus had looked at that photograph for a long time. He had thought about what it meant, not the famous man in it, not the cars in the background, not the dealership that had ignored a customer for 2 hours and paid a price for it. He had thought about what the photograph actually showed, underneath all of that. It showed a young man doing his job. That was all. A young man who had gotten up at 6:14 in the morning, ironed his shirt, knotted his tie 3 times, driven his cracked mirror Honda Civic to a car lot, and decided, in the face of everything that suggested he shouldn't bother, to walk across the floor and say good morning to a stranger. That was the whole story. Everything else, the 4 cars, the commission, the program, the dealership, the photograph on the wall, everything else, was just what happened when you did the small thing right. Marcus had the photograph framed before Web Motorworks opened its doors. Dark wood frame, simple white mat. He hung it on the wall near the entrance, not behind a desk, not in a back office, not in a place where only certain people would see it. Right there at eye level, where anyone walking through the door would see it immediately. Underneath it, on a small card in his own handwriting, he wrote the only thing that had ever needed to be said. Everyone who walks through this door gets a good morning. Web Motorworks opened on a Saturday, December 12, 2015. The morning was cold and clear, the kind of California winter morning that smells like wet oak leaves and distant rain. Marcus arrived at 6:14 a.m., same as always. He sat in his car for 30 seconds. He breathed. He remembered why. Then he unlocked the front door of his own building for the first time and stepped inside. He stood in the empty showroom for a moment, alone, in the quiet before everything began. The overhead lights hummed on one by one. The polished floor reflected them back. 6 vehicles sat in careful rows. Not 37, not yet, just 6. A beginning. The right size for the first day of a real thing. He straightened his tie in the reflection of the nearest car window. He walked to the entrance and stood beside the open door, the way he had stood beside the door at Bay Premium Motors, on 100 ordinary mornings, waiting for the day to begin. At 9:03 a.m., a black SUV pulled into the lot. Marcus watched it park. The door opened. The man who stepped out was wearing gray sweatpants and a navy blue hoodie. Marcus smiled before he even saw the face. He already knew. Stephen Curry walked across the lot in the December morning, hands in his pockets, looking at the 6 vehicles lined up in the pale winter sun, with the same quiet, focused attention he had brought to a showroom in Walnut Creek 2 years earlier. He stopped at the entrance. He looked at the photograph on the wall just inside the door. The 2 of them, Range Rover behind them, October light coming through the glass, neither of them looking at the camera. He looked at the card underneath it. He read it. He stood there for a moment. Then he looked at Marcus. "You really hung it up," he said. "First thing I put on the wall," Marcus said. Curry laughed. "The real kind. Deep and unguarded. The kind that belongs to genuine surprise. The kind you cannot manufacture." He shook his head slowly, still smiling, and looked around the showroom, the clean lines of it, the 6 cars, the photograph, the card, the man in the navy tie standing at his own front door. "So," Curry said, the smile settling into something quieter and warmer. He looked at Marcus the way he had looked at him on October 3, 2013, with the recognition of someone seeing exactly what is there, nothing more and nothing less. "What have you got?" Marcus Webb looked at the lot behind his old friend. He looked at the showroom behind him. His showroom, his name on the lease, his grandmother's city, his 6 cars on his first morning. He thought about the 30 seconds every morning, the ironed shirt, the cracked mirror, the notebook, the walk across the floor, the good morning that changed everything and nothing, because it had always been the right thing to do, and always would be, whether anyone famous was standing there or not. He smiled. "Come on in," he said. "I'll show you everything." If this story moved you even a little, drop where you are watching from in the comments right now. It could be a big city or a small town. It could be a country halfway across the world. Every single location that shows up down there is proof that stories about dignity and kindness travel further than any of us expect. And if Marcus's story made you feel something, if it reminded you that how you treat people is the truest thing about you, hit that like button right now. Not for the algorithm, not for the numbers, but because every like tells the world that this kind of story matters. That kindness matters. That a good morning matters. Subscribe to this channel if you believe that one small act of decency can change everything. Because that is exactly the kind of story we tell here, every single time. And right now, on your screen, there is another video waiting for you. One that will hit just as hard as this one. Maybe harder. Go watch it. Because the world needs more people like Marcus Webb. And the first step to being that person is understanding why his story matters so much. See you in the next one.